talk is going to be delicious JavaScript. I apologize if this makes you much more hungry than you already are. I did not realize they were going to put me in the slot right before lunch, but what are you going to do? So, if you'd like to follow along, my slides are available here. They're on my GitHub. It's a GitHub page, so it's my name. I'll leave it a little bit if you'd like to follow along with the slides. I know that's helpful, and especially since I'm not naturally a loud speaker, you can see the slides on there as I'm going through. Sorry, go ahead. So a little bit about me. I wrote a book called Coding for Kids Python. It's something I'm extremely proud of. It was the hardest thing I have ever had to do. I did this while working full-time, and I had to write 7 chapters on essentially how to teach someone to program who doesn't have a programming background, right? You have to explain what variables are, maybe some good practices of how to name them, what are loops, what are if-else statements. So that's something I'm just extremely proud of, and I like sharing about it. And if you have kids, this is a good way to learn. Or if you'd also like to get into Python. I also am a LinkedIn Learning instructor. I currently have 1 course, and I'm in the progress of working on another. And I specialize on Azure and cloud development. So I'm a C#.NET developer from the start. And obviously, as technologies change, I start incorporating the things that we need at work. But my last course is talking about how to fully bring an application from creation all the way through deployment, all the way through maintaining it. It was something I wish I had when I started out as a C# developer, because when you're starting to code, you kind of they tell you, okay, this is how you code, and that's it. It's this isolated box, like, what do I do with this? And then they say, oh, you got to deploy this. I'm like, where? So this is the course I wish that I had, brings you all the way through all of these kind of best practices for software development. So without further ado, so when I first started, like I said, I started as a C# developer, and as I started to get into JavaScript, and as I was talking to other developers, a lot of the same patterns started to emerge. One of them is JavaScript is hard. Why not, right? If you're unfamiliar with this syntax or unfamiliar with this programming language, I can completely understand why this would be difficult. If you are coming and starting from maybe a boot camp background or not necessarily a computer science degree, some of these things and concepts are difficult for programmers to understand, especially if you're just starting out from maybe HTML, CSS. Not saying that those are any less hard, it's a different kind of way to think about programming. Another reason I hear this is some other developers who have had the joy of not having to use JavaScript, especially pre-ES2 2015, you can tell that there are a lot more problems with the implementation of JavaScript at that time. So when I hear JavaScript is hard, this is usually the reasons I hear why. You'll also hear JavaScript is complicated. And I'm sure you've heard a lot of the other talks before, but especially pre-2015, and I'm sure you heard Lori speak about some of these things, some of the implementations just kind of made you scratch your head. And then as it iterated and as it got through, and I think for me personally, past ES 2015 is when JavaScript started becoming fun again and started becoming easier to understand, when syntax started to make a little bit more sense. But as this change went by so fast, year after year, you're already trying to keep up with all these other things, and then, oh, now there's an arrow in here somewhere? Like, what are you trying to make me understand? I already learned how to do it this way, and now we're going into this way. So it's very, very much complicated. The other reason why it's complicated is that it's paradigm agnostic. So what does that mean? JavaScript it doesn't have a set style, and you can come after me afterwards and argue with me, but it doesn't have a set style of how you're supposed to program it. So I said I was a C# developer in the beginning. That means I was trained on what object-oriented programming is. And as I started getting into JavaScript, there's more of a procedural way to do this. What I mean by procedural is when you write JavaScript, you write it step by step. You're telling the computer, what do I want you to do? What do I need you to calculate? Line by line, it will iterate and execute step by step. And what I hope to show you today is that JavaScript can be much more fun when you try to learn it in a more functional fashion. And a lot of that has to do with the methods that it has built in. But all of that is to say procedural, functional, object-oriented, each of these styles you can write JavaScript in. So that even adds more to the complication because you'll probably see documentation on it or examples in any of these different styles. So JavaScript is confusing, right? I looked like this pretty much the first 3 years that I started working with JavaScript. So what do I do? With all of these things about JavaScript, what do I do? Cue that song. You have it in your head playing. So when I run into problems in my life, I like to throw lots and lots of sugar at it. And so that's exactly what I did. So in this way, for myself, I am going to talk to you about the three most important, or what I think are the three most important and most commonly used methods, which are filter, map, and reduce. These are the array methods. You may have used them before. I guarantee you have not seen them in the examples I'm about to show you right now. So I will start with filter. So this one is fairly straightforward. The name itself lends itself to being understood easily. But we'll start with where most of us start. And I like to start with what's the official documentation, right? Where do most people get pointed to say, what does this thing do? And so I started with the official Mozilla docs. So what do the docs say? The filter method creates a new array with all elements that pass the test implemented by the provided function. Cool. Does anyone know what that means? So if you're starting out, does that make any sense to you at all? I don't think so. I think there's a tastier way to explain that. So let's say we have an array filled with food. There's a donut, there's a couple cookies, a carrot, random carrot actually, and then a croissant. And let's say we only wanted cookies, right? So in your head, you're already thinking, yeah, filter. What do you do when you filter that? You probably look at the array, you see the food that's in there, and you're doing some sort of calculation in your head. You're saying, what thing am I asking myself to say, is this a cookie or not? And then when you calculate that, when you execute that in your head, that's the thing that's the test that you're making, right? So we're gonna do the same thing in JavaScript. So this won't work, right? We need to pass an expression into it. We need to do that test that we're doing in our head. So it can be as simple as that, right? We're filtering this food on what is actually a cookie. Pretty straightforward. So the output of that would be just the cookies, only cookies. So map. When you look at the docs for map, again, it's a little bit verbose. The map method creates a new array with the results of a calling provided function on every element in the calling array. Tell me again, only tastier. So here I want to show a bag of marshmallows, and just like a real bag of marshmallows, you have some that are a little bit squished, you have some that are like super squished, and so I decided to show that as string marshmallows with a little weird casing here. Now let's say I only wanted to have jumbo marshmallows, or I had some sort of magical jumbo sizer machine that makes any kind of marshmallow large. Well, just like before, we need to do something with that initial array. We need to do something to that original bag of marshmallows so that our ending result, our desired result of all jumbo marshmallows are in fact big. So we can use map with that. Map is especially important once you start going into functional programming because it's very helpful with iterating through and applying something to every item in an array. And just like in this example, what we want to do here is make all the marshmallows big. So I'm going to use map to make all the marshmallows large. So as before, we're going to start and pass through each marshmallow into our map function, our map method, I'm sorry. And what we're going to do is, because these are string marshmallows, to jumbo size them, we're just going to uppercase them, right? And that's the output of it. All jumbo size marshmallows. Sweet, because jumbo marshmallows are amazing. But I'm sure you've noticed that there's a random cloud in there that's posing, that's trying to be a marshmallow. It's white, it's fluffy, but it's not a marshmallow. Should probably get rid of that. So you'll see here, the joy of functional programming is that something called chaining methods, or process of chaining methods. And with array methods, we can easily do that. So we see that we have our original map method here, but before we want to do that, before we want to uppercase all of our marshmallows, we want to take out that cloud. We don't want to unnecessarily create an uppercase cloud, or we don't even want that in there because that's not part of our ideal output. So what do? We'll take our map function, put it down there, and because I like to be thorough, I'm going to say jumbo marshmallows are now filtered jumbo marshmallows. As purely preference, I just like it because it explains it a little bit better and it's different from what we did before. So now what we can do is do that first step. We want to filter out any random clouds first, and we can do that with the filter method. And there are several ways to do this. This is not the way, it's just, again, you need to pass an expression in there. You need something that evaluates, a Boolean expression that evaluates to true or false, so that when you pass each marshmallow in there, it says yes or no. And if it passes that, then it will move on to the next method. So in this case, our filter is filtering out anything that is not a marshmallow, and then we'll go back and uppercase it. So now that's the output we were looking for. We wanted purely jumbo marshmallows, that's it, no random clouds. Okay, now there's reduce. This is the one that struck fear in my heart since the very beginning, because you do filter, you do map, you do some of the other array methods that are there, and they kind of make sense. But when I talk to a lot of developers, this is the one that, I don't know, for whatever reason, became so much more difficult to understand, was so much more intimidating. And, you know, this doesn't help. The official documentation says, the reduce method executes a reducer function that you provide on each element of the array, resulting in a single output value. That's a mouthful, and that's not the sweet kind. So again, I wanted to try to put examples in here that make sense to me, put things in here that are not just another copy of some other example on a blog post, and I wanted to do something that's more relatable to me, so that's why I'm doing these kinds of dessert-based examples, because desserts capture my attention for much longer. So you'll see here we have a donut log, and if you haven't been able to tell by now, I really like sweets, preferably the baked kind, pastries, and so I have decided to keep a log of all of the donuts that I eat throughout my travels. I travel a lot. I don't have time for like pure breakfasts. I probably just grab something and go, and so in order for me to see how terrible I've been, I want to log how many donuts I've eaten. And part of that is knowing how many calories I've consumed, because, you know, I need to keep my figure right? Or else I'm gonna have to buy new dresses, and that's not gonna be fun. So with this donut log, we want to reduce. We want to get to that single output. We want to calculate something that no matter what we pass in there, it's going to result in some single thing. It's a single value. It's a single object, something that comes down to one less thing that we want to work with. And just like before, we need to pass something in there. So from the docs, this is where most people get intimidated. This is where I got intimidated, and where I said, you threw another parameter in there, what do I do? So the naming here doesn't help. If you take out accumulator, if you put your hand up and just take out accumulator, it looks fairly similar to some of the other methods that we've already seen. But now by adding this extra one in there, kind of tricks our minds, makes it seem like it's a little bit more difficult, but it's not. And to help with that, I'm going to change the name of these things. So instead of accumulator and current value, I'm going to do last count and current entry. And with this, the accumulator is the thing that we want to keep track of. So in this case, that's the last thing I want, which is the calories consumed. That's the aggregating thing. That's the thing we're keeping count of. And then, just like before, the thing that we're working on, the last value, or the last entry, what is the current value, I'm sorry, is going to be the current entry in my donut log. And that's all that the reducer function is. We just added something else in there because we needed to keep track of that one output. So when we add this, this is fairly simple. We're going to just total the amount of calories eaten, right? And we're going to pass something in there to be able to aggregate that, to total that. But before we do that, we need to set this parameter. So this is optional. That's the 0 there. And this is the initial value. So as we start our reduce function, you'll see here that when we go into it, we need to start adding to the prior count. And hopefully I've been good, but at this point, it's 0, right? I haven't consumed any donuts at this point. It's 0 calories. So this initial value then is going to be kind of like the seed value. This is the first thing that's going to be returned. And that's where that goes, last count. So when we first go through our reduce function, last count right now is 0, the very first time we run this, right? And to that, we're now going to add the current entry, which right now is Monday, and the total eaten, which is 2 donuts that I've eaten on Monday, times some Googled amount of what the average amount of calories are in a donut, which is 278. So when we run this, the first time, last count is 0. I didn't eat anything. We're on the first entry, which is Monday. I ate 2 that day. I'm going to multiply that by the amount of average calories in a donut, and I'm going to add that to my last count, and that's what's returned. So now this count is, what is that, 556? Is my math right? I think so, 556. So at the point that we calculate Monday, the calories consumed are 556. So now, when we go through it the second time, last count is no longer 0. Last count is now 556. And we repeat that process. So it just keeps shifting. So that last count, that accumulator value, that's the thing that we are keeping track of. And at the end of it, the total amount of calories I've consumed is 3,336. That was a great week. And so now I want to go through and kind of combine all of these things together. And I was told that one of the best donut shops here was called Sugar Shack. Does anybody agree with that? Okay. Okay, good. So I decided to peek around and look at what they offered, and I took some of the flavors that they had on there, and I put it in an array here. Because we only have one donut emoji, right? I have a little change there. It didn't go there, but I decided to put some of the flavors of the donuts there. And what I want to do is I want to place an order based solely on emojis, right? So once these emojis are here, I want to output a receipt of what I actually ordered from Sugar Shack. And we can do that with the methods that I've just shown you. So we will start, 1 second, this looks wrong. This may be the wrong version of my, this is what happens when you put changes in last minute. Let me see, well, we can do this anyway. Unless it's gonna be the same one. Here we go, debugging on the fly. Let's see. Only cookies. I think I have completely overwritten my last one. Nope, that's there. Okay, so we'll work with this. So I apologize. So this was supposed to have all of the donut flavors, but we'll do the same thing. Any other cafe here will probably have the same items in here, right? And the concept still stays the same. I want to order via emojis. I want to translate that into some sort of receipt. And we'll set a constant here of what I've, again, Googled. Richmond combined sales tax is about 0.53. So the first thing we want to do is get the receipt items ready. So out of the menu, I want to filter out all the things that are actually part of my order. And we can do that with filter. So what we're doing here is, out of my order, only include the things in the menu that have my emoji, that are part of my order. After we filter those things out and it's only part of my order, we want to map these things to get the items we need for the receipt. So the first thing we'll do is calculate the number ordered. And how we do that is, as we pass each item now, each filtered item, we're going to say how many of that emoji are in there. And that's the total amount that I've ordered. And finally, we will return the receipt items here. I want to return the actual emoji of what the item is that I've ordered. I want to return the price, which is just the price coming out of the menu plus the number that I've ordered, and then the actual number ordered. So those are my receipt items. Now I want to calculate the totals. So in the same fashion, we will use some of these methods. And in this case, reduce is our best bet, right? Totals are aggregated amounts. Totals are things that we are calculating down to a single value. So we're doing the same thing here. So we'll start with totals, which at this point again is 0, right? Last count is 0, last value accumulator 0 at this point. And then the next parameter is our current entry. Now in this case, don't be worried, this is just something called destructuring. So if you remember in the last part, when I returned my items, I'm returning the emoji, I'm returning the price, and I'm returning the number ordered. But I don't need all of that right now. I only need the price. That's all I need to work with to calculate the totals. So I'm using this syntax, which is called destructuring, to only grab the items that I need. So we're going to pass the totals, which is 0, and the current price. And as before, we calculate it, right? Subtotal will be the subtotal and the price. Sales tax, and that's another typo, I apologize. So that would be Richmond. And we were returning subtotal and sales tax. And then again, this is our initial value, right? Before we started with 0 calories. Here we're starting a subtotal of 0 and a sales tax of 0 because we haven't calculated anything yet. And then you can do this in a much better fashion. I just wanted to prove a point that you can create a fairly readable receipt with just some strings and these methods. And if we console log that, we would get something that looks like this. And I'm really, really upset. I'm going to kick myself because I probably overwrote it with a change that I had. But I was going to pull this out and say it matches the order that I had. So I did actually order 2 chocolate, 1 strawberry, 1 sweet coconut, 1, I have no idea what this one is. You can come tell me, someone tell me, and 1 strawberry. But yeah, but that's it. But what the point I wanted to make here is that these methods, these array methods, they're super helpful. And they are the building blocks of the functional style of programming. When you start to learn and get comfortable with them, you can do awesome things like this. I mean, if you start adding lambda functions, you can literally order this with this kind of stuff. But what I wanted to show was that it is not as intimidating as you think it is. If you kind of put your own spin to it, if you put something that catches your own attention, that will help you keep engaged longer with these kinds of things, I think you have a better chance of trying again, even if you get frustrated and don't understand it the first time. And that's clearly what I did, and that's what I do moving forward. I try to throw these kinds of silly examples in there. But the other part is I actually really learn what it's doing. And when I have to try to explain it to somebody else, it's much easier for me to go through and say what's happening line by line. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I hope you're happy that it's a little bit earlier because we can all go to lunch. But salamat, that means thank you in Tagalog, and you can find me here. And that's all I have today. Thank you.